Thank you all for being here. It's a really great turnout so early in the morning. This next conversation is about the role of AI in the lives of Black people, which is an incredibly timely and salient conversation. I think you'll see that in the media, there's this kind of binary conversation about the end of the world or our salvation. So to help us have a conversation about how Black people are going to alter and augment the role that AI can play in our lives is Lydia Laval and Odi Edo-Osage, who are going to introduce their companies as well. I should say before I go that this session is sponsored and supported by Microsoft AI, who are also sponsoring the after party at the end of the day. Enjoy.
Hi everyone, my name is Lydia and I am the co-founder and CEO of Ori. We are an AI platform that allows people to experience better palliative and end-of-life care via avatars that we create.
Hi everyone, can everyone hear me?
I think so.
Okay, let's just hear me. My name's Odi. I'm a lead data scientist at Depop, and on the side run an AI startup called Brushwork, which aims at making art accessible to underrepresented artists and groups.
All right, and virtually we have Adrian Joseph joining us. He'll be joining us virtually. So yeah. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started and ask some questions. So to both you, as well as to Adrian, I want to ask, what are the potential benefits of AI for the Black community, just straight up generally?
I'm not sure if Adrian is on yet and has
Yeah.
an answer, but I would think the main thing that stands out to me, I think, is healthcare, because not everyone might know that Black people need certain specific kind of care, or might be more at risk to certain conditions and diseases, and you hear about things of Black women not being given the proper painkillers that they need when they're giving birth and things like that. So if we had all of these things baked into automatic decisions, if say your watch, instead of being programmed, your Apple Watch being programmed to tell you that you're having a heart attack at the same rate as everyone else, but instead it's telling you, as a Black person, you might want to cut back on that, you might want to look after that. So I think kind of tailored healthcare that would be a really good one.
Right. I think that just jumping off of that, just, having smaller models in general that are focused around a specific person rather than just these generalized models that focus on basically what term is everyone, right?
Yeah, it's because it's if you think of facial recognition trying to literally recognize every single kind of face, different kinds of features, it'd be kind of ridiculous that we'd expect the same for healthcare, because biologically we're all fundamentally different. It'd be cool to have saying you might want to eat more of this, you might want to eat less of that because of being at risk of more things and fewer things like that.
Right, 100%. Okay, so just what are some of the drawbacks that you believe are happening for AI in terms of the Black community as a whole? I guess you kind of touched on a few, but maybe if you have others, or if you want to expand a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a few. I guess one of the first being kind of self-fulfilling prophecies, and so feedback loops that deepen existing biases. So there's this really good book called Weapons of Math Destruction by, I want to say Cathy O'Neill, I can't remember the name of the author, but she talks about this I can never say this word, recidivism model. And recidivism is basically the likelihood that a criminal is going to reoffend.
Right.
So this, I want to say state of Texas had this judge, this court, where they were trying to put this model in place to say, how likely is this person to reoffend? So do we give them a harsher sentence or a lighter sentence? And the motivation behind it was good, in the sense that they wanted to standardize sentencing. They didn't want certain judges to be giving out, harsher ones. They just kind of make it standardized. But what ended up happening is they were looking at data points that just fed back into stereotypes. So they were looking at things like, do you know anyone in your family who's ever been to prison? Mm-hmm. How many of your friends have been to prison? Things like that. And if you're from certain backgrounds, you might not, if you're maybe from a middle class background, you might not know anyone who's been to prison, but if you're from certain Black neighborhoods, you might. So things like that just kind of like deepen the bias, and so that can be really bad. And we would need to kind of factor that into any whatever models we're making, that there's no biases being deepened.
Right, 100%. It's especially when it's concerning people's lives and
Yeah.
their livelihoods. It's something that we definitely have to take that very seriously, 100%. I think that. Okay, actually, I'll just jump on to the next question. Actually, so how do you think that the Black community in general can just be better informed and prepared for the potential challenges that are imposed by AI in the future or even now?
I think one that probably is a really boring one, but maybe even applies to everyone, is just kind of like paying attention to the data that's being collected and what you're consenting to. Because I know that, like, maybe it's just me being anal, but like when you go on websites and they say, da da da, do you want to consent to your cookies,
Right.
etc. Like, I actually like do not consent. Like I have to make the effort to do that, and then I always assumed everyone else did that. And then I was talking to my friends, and no, I saw one of my friends like going on their phone, and she just like quickly like pressed accept, and I was like, why'd you do that?
Yeah.
So I guess paying attention to the data that you're giving out would be a good one. Another one I think is maybe kind of trying to, I guess Black people will need to be mindful of their copyrights. I think everyone as well, but in the world that we're moving into with like AI and models being built on our data, we kind of need to be mindful of what we're putting out there, and if we're actually taking ownership of those things. So, if you're going to build something on my data, then I should be getting something out of it. I should be either compensated or it should be working for me. So yeah, just kind of being mindful about data collection, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think you touched upon like data collection in terms of what you're giving out digitally, right, when you access websites, but also what we're giving out non-digitally, because believe it or not, a lot of information is actually shared.
Yeah.
For example, like if you end up like getting married or if you end up going to court or something,
Yeah.
before you know it, there's like a data broker that's like sharing that
Yeah,
all over the
100%.
place. And to
Yeah.
opt out of it is actually really hard. I know because I went through that process, and I was like, actually take my stuff down right now.
Yeah, and like sometimes it takes ages for them to take
Yeah.
it, if they do at all. And saying that, so during my PhD, my thesis was on kind of social media surveillance. So the idea was to see if we could, by having an AI monitor social media on a computerized scale,
Right.
see if we could like see patterns in various things. And our kind of subject was public health. So can we kind of figure out outbreaks in certain diseases
Right.
from people mentioning it on Twitter? So if a lot of people are complaining about not being able to breathe or asthma, etc., we can maybe see a spike in those things and kind of be like, okay, well, this is above normal levels of people talking about asthma, so maybe
Right.
there's something happening. And a lot of people probably don't know that, like, I don't know, some guy in some room was like reading their tweets, because low-key I was. I mean, it was anonymized, but people don't, I guess, necessarily think that the data they put out there is, being used. I mean, in that particular scenario, it was being used for good, but I mean, who knows?
Yeah, being used and also highly valuable.
Exactly.
Just like going off of that, do you think that there might be like a change in terms of how the ownership of our data in the future at any point? Like, is it like I've heard people throw around theories in terms of like being monetized for like the data that not monetized but compensated
Yeah.
for the data that you give out to companies, or how it's shared, or getting a cut of it back, or something like that. Are you familiar with that?
I think it'd be hard. It'd be hard to do it like financially, because I think then part of the reason why companies kind of throw so much attention and investment at big data and monopolized data is fundamentally data is cheap. So from their perspective, there's little to no cost and a lot to benefit. And I think when people start having to pay for things, I think it will probably slow down the rate of innovation, but maybe that might be a good thing as well.
Right.
I think the compensation one, I'm really not sure. I just don't see. I find it hard to picture a world where like we're paying people for tweets, because I've seen some tweets and you shouldn't be paying. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think we mentioned briefly some of the ethical concerns around the collection of data and how it's being used in some of these algorithms from marginalized people in general. I don't know if you wanted to go a little bit deeper or if there was anything else that was maybe like at the front of your mind that you wanted to add on that. If not, we'll just move on.
No, I think that's, yeah.
Okay. So I have a very specific question now, just like going into like your experience, obviously working at Depop. Do you predict that with the rise of generative AI, that there will be like a huge impact on the retail or e-commerce space? And what are the implications for Black artists, creators, and makers in general?
I think if it keeps going on, there definitely will be. And in terms of the impact on like black creators and businesses, I think black people in general have always kind of found some ways to thrive. So I think we'll fundamentally continue to do that. But I guess broadly speaking, I'd say on the creative side, first of all, I think my prediction, and this completely, my prediction, is that we'll probably see a lot of innovation and like new forms of art, like a lot of good creative art forms will come out of it. I mean, so for example, I think it was maybe over the summer, I don't know, times of concept.
Right.
But there was this whole fiasco about Spotify taking down this song. That it was so a music producer had like made a beat and then gotten like some OpenAI program to generate written lyrics and gotten the OpenAI program to use the Drake and the Weeknd's voice.
Right.
Put that on the song and put that on Spotify. And loads of people loved that song, listening to it, and people thought that was a legitimate Drake and the Weeknd song.
Oh, wow.
So this producer somehow kind of finessed his way to having a song with Drake and the Weeknd.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know. Obviously, there's like ethical and like copyright concerns there, but I think that to me is quite a creative way of using creative generative AI. So I think probably we'll see a lot of like innovation and cool stuff will come out of it. On the flip side, I guess, is that we will need to be careful to, like we were talking about earlier, like making sure that black creatives are compensated. So, you have things like, for example, Drake and the Weeknd. If that producer is using their likeness, they should be getting like some royalties or some cuts for it. Because I think in historically, art and culture have been, I guess, taken from black people and kind of corrupted. If you look at Elvis Presley and like rock and roll, even fashion, pop culture, black people create something, someone comes, steals it, makes it theirs, kind of runs with it.
Right.
So I think in this kind of nascency, this early stage of creative and generative AI, we need to make sure that like the stuff that we do make is attributed to us and we are credited for it. And then on the like black business side, I also kind of think it would be a good thing potentially, in the sense of lowering the like barrier of entry, basically bringing down certain barriers. So for example is the idea of like no code, which is, you try and start a business, you might not know how to like write code, but you want to build a quick like proof of concept to show people, get some feedback, with like AI tools that kind of help you automatically generate code. That will probably make no code tools better, which will in turn make black business owners able to like create apps and websites for their products really quickly. Another thing I'm not really sure about this, but another thing I think would probably be like entering into like niche markets, because I'm sure a lot of people have businesses that they would like to make available to like special niche groups. So for example, not a lot of products are being offered to like African countries because they speak a different language. It's just kind of hard to like break that barrier. But with like AI, like speech synthesis, translation, you can kind of maybe automatically offer your product in like Nigeria, for example, in like you can have your app in Yoruba or something else quite easily. So I think that could be really good. But yeah, on the flip side, I guess the possible risks are obviously, like I mentioned earlier, people just getting their stuff stolen, but also maybe kind of there is that big fear I think everyone had when ChatGPT came out with like, jobs are going to be stolen,
Right.
etc. And I think that is a concern. Like, you see blog posts content marketing, people just have like ChatGPT to write content
Right.
articles, and that's taken away from actual writers. But I think a potential kind of reaction to that will be a human premium. So
Right.
the idea is AI generated content like images, articles, etc. will maybe kind of become the norm. And then if you want human made, that's seen as like the gold standard. You're like paying extra for that. That's like everything else is like the free is the AI generated stuff. The premium stuff that you're paying for is like the human generated stuff.
Right. Do you know what makes me feel a lot better about AI and why it's not necessarily just, doom and gloom for Black people is that with generative AI specifically, it basically, the last 6 months, basically, we've seen a major boom, but also in that time, because we have platforms like Twitter, like Instagram, places where, it has democratized people being able to speak up and speak out.
Yeah.
The regulations are also coming in quite quickly. You have leaders such as Sophia Noble, Joy Buolamwini, and also like there's been a lot of movement at the government level to kind of slow down some of the negative impacts that AI is having right now. And of course, one of the first places that generative AI is being utilized is in the arts. So you're seeing a lot of very quick movement, and that's something that I don't think that we would have seen that maybe like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's happening right now and we're at a place where the necessary reactions can happen very quickly makes me feel a lot better. Like even for myself, like I'm like a major Nicki Minaj fan, for example. I love Nicki. Her new album's coming out. But so something that I noticed is that she specifically tweeted for her fans to not use AI-generated images of her or to not like AI-generated songs of hers. And everybody kind of like moved right along to stop doing that. She was able to advocate for herself via some of, basically via social media, right? So I think that, artists being able to speak up for themselves, but also that kind of like environment allows us to have more, I guess, trust and safety built in as it's developing. Do you see that as well in terms of like how we can make this, I guess, more fair and more just as it's going?
Yeah, I think working with the creatives is going to be a key to that. So like Nikki being able to step in and say, okay, this is my work, this is how I want it to be interacted with, this is how I want it to operate. I think, if we can do that, honestly, I think, that's beautiful. We'll have nailed it. So for my, on the side, I mentioned, running Brushwork, the art startup. We're currently trialing this thing where we're working with a few artists where if say you wanted to buy a piece of art, we can take some of our artists who you might like their style and transfer that style onto it. So think of it as like a kind of chimera mix and match. So we like this painting, but what if it was like reimagined as a painting by like this other artist? And so what we're doing, we've been talking to some artists, and they're really interesting conversations because they don't actually mind that they, it's like a new creative outlet. It's another way for them to express themselves. So they're really into it. But the key thing is actually just paying them. So if that artwork that has their style imprinted on it sells, then they want like at least 50% of the commission.
Right.
Personally, I think it's fair. Like, they, in a sense, have also contributed to that. So like working with artists in the room with like AI, I think that's what's going to be key to making it work. Them having a say over how they're,
Right. All right. So I think that we're gonna open it up for some Q&A. All right. So I'm gonna figure out how we're gonna execute that. I believe there's a question in the back or question right here.
Hello. Thank you so much for presenting. It was an awesome conversation. One question that I had, and I think you started to address it when you talked about AI's kind of impact on the workforce. I'm curious on your thoughts around AI, specifically as it relates to the digital divide, and maybe more specifically around digital literacy. Folks in the Black community trying to enter tech or enter the workforce. What do you think are the potential harms or maybe benefits of leveraging some of this technology to kind of upskill or kind of participate in building, so on and so forth?
I think it could be really powerful in giving people a jump start. So you're trying to write, say for example, I'm trying to write a job application. I'm not very, maybe dyslexic. There's certain like programs that will like automatically generate text, and I can like edit it, and it kind of will ghost write my things for me, and I can just kind of like plug in the meat into the article. So I think that will kind of help people. The thing to be careful there, I think, is maybe making sure, in terms of your point about digital literacy, making sure that people actually understand how these things are built, how they work. Because it's one thing to use it, it's another thing to actually understand the data that you're feeding it, how it's not a real person, and it's probabilistic, and maybe you actually do need to proofread it, and you can't just send that thing out. So making sure people are aware of the way it should be used. But other than that, I think it'd be really helpful.
I speak to black founders every day, and they always feel like they're alone in their problems and in their stories.
Everyone.
Oh. Okay. Something that I would add to that is that it's really important to don't be discouraged in terms of how everybody makes it seem like this is very complicated. Obviously, there's like a lot of subject matter expertise, and it can get quite complex. But I want to encourage people of color to be able to participate in the building and into the engineering of some of these algorithms as we're moving forward. There are so many courses available on Udemy, on online sources that help you to learn how these things are made, how they're created, and the more you dive into it, the less scary it seems, and the more knowledgeable you are, and the more you can have a seat at the table. So I'm a huge advocate in people really just getting their hands dirty, and everybody's kind of learning as we're going. So if you find it to be a little bit complicated, or you feel like a little bit of imposter syndrome, just know that we're all kind of winging it, because it's basically in development right now. So I say just get your hands dirty, and don't be afraid to get into it and become a data scientist, or do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're at the table. All right. Is there any other questions? I think we have another one. Yeah.
Hiya. I just had a quick question about what your thoughts are in regards to, I don't know if you've seen the recent news about celebrities selling the rights to their likeness to companies like Meta and things like that. And so that's been showing up recently. And I think myself and a lot of people I've spoken about it find that very, I don't know, it's interesting, but at the same time, it's like, what are the potential implications of doing things like that, like selling the right to your image to companies like that? So yeah, just curious to know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, I think it's I'm not in these rooms where people are making these deals, but I think it's the Wild West. Nobody really knows. So the people selling their likenesses don't really know how that's going to go. They're just kind of, I think, trying to get ahead of the situation and say, well, if this stuff's going to like run wild anyway, I might as well kind of benefit from it and have some control. So I think, to me, it feels like just like the Wild West and quite a scary thing, but probably the right direction in terms of at least they're getting paid. But I hope, in terms of like not being in those rooms, I hope that contracts there are limited in scope. So you don't want something where they're using their likeness for, hopefully they have a say what their likenesses are being used for, because I think that would be a human right violation sort of thing. And maybe not in perpetuity, but I think, like you were saying earlier about regulation and governments starting to catch up, I think once that gets further ahead, we'll start to see like standardized contracts of what you can and can do with someone's likeness, whether they sell it to you or not. I think for now, companies like Meta are just kind of like, creating those things because they can. But I think in the future, it'll probably become more normal, and they'd be more like frameworks and, precedents for it.
All right. Another question? All right, we have one in the back.
Hi, thanks. So you spoke a little bit about best practices with regards to AI and data and all of that. And I kind of wanted to go into the regulation, and what kind of regulations you thought would be, or what kind of regulations would you suggest should be at the front of the mind of governments and people who are kind of at those tables?
I think so. Without getting too, I guess, technical, when I'll start from So when models are being built, these AI models, you typically test them, but what you're testing is their performance. So we have these metrics, basically how correct it is, and everybody cares about that. Like all the papers are like, oh, this is state of the art. They're trying to boost accuracy by like 0.2%. Like everybody's going crazy for that. But what nobody's testing, there are other metrics. Like it's not everyday precision recall F1. There's metrics that measure bias and impact. So there's one called like disparate impact, a few others that I can't remember now, kind of parity. So parity is the idea that if this model predicts positive for this person, will it predict positive for this person if they were a different race or a different gender or a different protected attribute? So the idea is, I think a good regulation would be, don't release a model unless it's past this metric beyond a certain threshold, because there's the FDA, for example. We have like safety regulations for food, for technology, for everything. But for AI, there's no safety. We're just kind of out here. As long as it works, if it blows up, but like it works. So I think that would probably be the first thing I think we need to regulate.
And I think there's something to add to that is that it's important to mention that in certain areas there really is very little room for error, right? So something that I would like, governments to know and to put out there is that when it comes to things like law enforcement or healthcare, right, that threshold cannot be, just, good enough for, a white middle-aged man, right? It has to be work at the 99th percentile for everyone. So we have to take almost a sociological approach to it as well. So for very sensitive places that impact people's lives and their direct livelihoods, it's very important that we take a sociological approach to understand how does this impact people on a race level, on a gender level, and things like that, and make sure that it's performing at the highest level of precision for each of those subcategories. Otherwise, hard stop. We can't play with people's lives like that. So that's something that I think needs to, definitely be put out there for governments to regulate. And of course, industries like, crime and policing, right, should have higher standards than others, such as like the arts, for example, or, maybe just like fun technology, right? So, all right. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your time. Thanks for joining us. And it was a great conversation. Thank you, Odie. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.